Hello and welcome. Today we're talking about creating a cyber incident response plan for your business. My name is Kirsty Steele. I'm the Cyber Resilience Community Lead at the Scottish Business Resilience Centre, or SBRC. At SBRC, we provide organisations with tools and knowledge to become more resilient and mitigate potential threats, both on and offline. I wanted to start a session with a quick poll question with yourselves, just to get an idea of what's bringing you along to the session today. So let me just pop this on for you. So we've got a question on the screen here, and it's just to find out a little bit more about what brings you to the call today. So the first point is asking if you want help on setting up a cyber incident response plan for your business. And the second one here is to ask that you already have a cyber incident response plan, but you're looking to improve it. So I'll just give you a few seconds to answer those questions. Can see all the answers coming in here, and I'll share the results with you in a second. Just letting the others that are just joined the call answer the poll. Okay, doc. So I can see here that about 87% of you are looking to set up an incident response plan for your business, which is brilliant, because that's what I'm going to help you talk through today. And I can see some of you, 13% already have some sort of incident response plan with your business, but you're looking at ways to improve it. So hopefully in this session, you'll also get some tips along the way of how you can compare what you've got in place just now with what our pack has to offer. That's great. Thank you so much for that. So in Scotland, we've seen a growing number of businesses being impacted by cyber incidents. And this could be unauthorized access to your organization's IT system, or cyber criminals launching attacks, infecting your systems with viruses, holding your data to ransom, or trying to trick your staff into clicking on links on suspicious emails. And here in Scotland, the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, SEPA, was affected by ransomware. It knocked several of their key systems offline, causing major disruption to their staff and made it difficult for them to do their work. And most recently, one of Scotland's biggest engineering firms, Glasgow-based Weir Group, was a victim of a cyber attack. The cost to recover is thought to be millions of pounds. At this webinar, you'll learn how to use our cyber incident response pack to plan the steps that your business should take if you're involved in a cyber attack or data breach. And today I've got some really great speakers on the call with us. I've got Detective Sergeant Craig Potter from Police Scotland, and I've got Katrina Garcia Alice from legal company CMS. And we're going to hear from them a little later in the session. Now, your business already has some plans in place to deal with critical incidents. Everyone in your office knows the fire drill, right? When the alarm goes off, you leave the building, you leave your personal belongings behind. And hopefully it's been a little while since you've had to stand outside in the rain in the middle of a car park with a fire marshal in a high-vis vest, checking everybody's name off the list. Now, a fire isn't likely to happen, and you hope that it doesn't happen. But you've tested this out in your business so that you know what to do in case of an emergency. And we should be treating cyber incidents the same way. If suddenly all of your machines were locked and no one could access their files, would you or your staff know what to do? Who are you going to call? We should have a plan and test it. An incident response plan is a set of instructions that are designed to help you prepare, detect, respond, and recover from cyber incidents. And it can be quite complicated to put a plan together, but we've made it easy for you. We've got experts in this area to prepare everything that you need to create your own plan. and we've put all of their documents in this pack. So this is a brilliant resource, and I'm pleased that I'm going to show you today what is included. So let's take a look at the pack. So this is what it looks like. The pack is easy to follow guide for setting up your incident response plan for your business. So it has checklists, action plans, template documents that you can use today. And there are 5 main documents included in the pack, which are listed on the screen. And for this session, I'm going to give you a quick overview, and I'm going to pick out some of the important parts. So the introduction document, that basically shows you what's in the pack, but it also has some links to other useful resources. So for example, the Cyber Aware Action Plan. So this is a link. If you click on those wordings at the top of the pack, this will take you to a questionnaire that you can go through, and it will give you a tailored list of actions to improve your cyber security and prevent an incident even happening in the first place. So there's lots of different hyperlinks within all of these documents, so you can go through these in your own time and take a look at what's included. The next document we have is a Prepare Your Business checklist. And this checklist helps you identify and prioritize your company's most valuable assets. And it walks you through a set of questions to get you thinking about what you need to be, what your business needs to protect, and how you're going to do that, how you're going to keep it secure. And by taking the time to fill out these details now, you'll be setting yourself up in a better place to respond and recover from even the most serious cyber incidents. So I'll have a look at this one a little bit in more detail here. So you can see everything is listed on the side, and there's little check boxes there so that you can go through and mark them when you've completed them. Then there's a section on the right-hand side so that you can add in your own notes or comments that you might need to go back, because some of these steps might take a little bit of time for you to complete. So one of the points here, it says to identify and prioritize your most valuable assets. So this is getting you to think about what's important for your business, why is it important, and how are you going to protect it? And what have you currently got in place to do that? You've got some other key points here about understanding your IT service contracts and being aware of what's covered in your insurance policy. So for your IT team, what data are they responsible for? Are they protecting it? Do they include backups within their protection? Are they turned on? Are they working? These are all things that you can go through and check. And if we look at the right-hand side a little closer, we've got one here that says capture business emergency contacts. And the first point here is to create an emergency contact document, which includes your staff names and contact details, emergency contacts, customers, and suppliers. Now, we've provided a template to help you do this, and that's also included in the pack. So that's our next document. And this is an editable Word document that allows you to store all your business emergency contact details. So you can put in things like your IT team's number and other useful contacts in your organization, like your HR, your CEO, and your staff. But it also allows you to capture other details like your banking and insurance company information, and also any other stakeholder information that you might need to report to in case of an incident. So you want to keep this document up to date and make sure that it's stored in a safe place that's easily accessed should you need it. So it's worthwhile also having a printed version of this, because likely if it is a cyber incident, you might not be able to access your computer. The next document in the pack helps you plan your communications about cyber incidents. So if there was a cyber incident that might affect staff or customers, so for example, a data breach where their personal details have been stolen, you will have a duty to keep your staff and your customers informed. So it's best to keep any messaging clear, honest, and simple. And this will ensure that your audience has the right information that they need in a reasonable time, helping to maintain trust. The advice in this document will help you do that. Now, the other document in the pack is the legal implications of a cyber incident. And today on the call, we've actually got the writer of this section, which is Katrina Garcia Alice, and she works for the legal company CMS. So I'm going to bring Katrina on the call here so that she can talk through this next section with us all. So hi, Katrina, welcome. Thank you.
Hi, thanks very much for having me along today. It's lovely to be able to come and have this chance to speak to everybody and also to have been able to contribute to the pack in the first place. So thank you. I would just reiterate what Kirsty's already said. I think the pack is a great idea. It's very practical. It's something that businesses can pick up and use straight away. It's comprehensive without being complicated, and with all the checklists and templates and action plans and so on to work through, and the guidance that you can keep safe and refer back to. It really is a great wee tool. I think what comes across loud and clear from the pack generally and from each of the materials in it is that preparation for an incident and planning ahead is key, both to the successful management of the incident and also to mitigation of the risks that it poses. And this pack will certainly help you make those plans in advance. When an incident occurs, you don't want to still be at the stage of having to work out who's going to deal with what and how the heck do you contact them when your email and your phone systems are all down, and what does your insurance policy say, and did you even remember to renew it this year, and also what to tell the public and affected customers and when and how. You do want to be able to focus on managing the incident in a coordinated and measured way. So for businesses that want to develop a good incident response plan, and I think that's the majority of people on the call going by the first poll this morning, or for those that have a plan but just want to check how it measures up. And if you don't have technical background or experience in cybersecurity, this pack really is a great toolkit to go to. So looking at the legal implications document that CMS have provided, and just to talk about what benefit that brings to a business. So I'm just going to start by just setting it, the context of it to start with, which is to explain about to CMS and what it's based on. So this document comes from the experience that my colleagues and I have over the whole range of issues that are relevant to managing a breach. So for example, we have teams who advise on data protection generally and the compliance side of things, without any kind of thoughts to, well, with thought to incidents, but before any incidents have occurred. We have a well-established and international cyber breach response team, which provides first responder services 24/7, 365. Some of us are on call to manage those incidents. And we also have teams of experienced litigators who can assist with claims that might follow after the event of an incident. I myself have been a first responder for the last 5+ years, offering legal support to SMEs who discover they've had an incident, usually within the first 48 to 72 hours, but beyond that period if required. And more recently, we've had increasing experience in the Scottish team with legal claims made against SMEs by data subjects seeking damages arising from an incident. And we are definitely seeing a rise in the number of claims that are being made in Scotland. In the legal implications document that's in the pack, we have provided straightforward guidance on the key commercial and legal implications of a cyber incident. Awareness of these is absolutely key to responding appropriately to any incident and mitigating the risks arising from it. Clearly, every incident is entirely unique and has to be dealt with in a way that's unique to those characteristics, but there are certain general points, such as these commercial and legal implications, that are common to all cyber incidents, and so you can prepare a plan that will cover all scenarios in advance. So turning to just consider a bit about what the legal responsibilities of a business are, and what the legal implications for a business are, and how this pack is going to help you to consider those and deal with them and plan for them. So the document we have prepared is broken down into sort of the three component parts. The key commercial and legal implications of a cyber incident arise in relation to regulatory obligations and risks, contractual obligations, and to litigation risk as well. As I say, these are all covered in the legal implications document within the pack, and I would encourage you to consider them for the guidance offered. Now, each of these components is important, and neglecting any one of them can lead to its own set of risks. Turning to the first one, regulatory obligations, I think it's possibly the most complicated of the three. And so we have quite deliberately set out clearly and fully guidance on the regulatory notification obligations which can arise in the event of a cyber incident, and which hopefully will be really useful note for you to be able to refer back to when required. Owing to the nature of the information regulators require to be advised of, prioritising regulatory investigations will not only help you mitigate the risk of regulatory penalties and fines, but will also help you clarify and obtain information that is likely to be critical to other urgent communications, such as communications to data subjects, to staff, to third-party contractors, and so on. In particular, you need to be aware of your obligations to the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO. Relevant breaches of the UK GDPR need to be reported to the ICO. And as the UK GDPR applies to all organisations providing goods and services in the UK, the regulatory obligations owed to the ICO are something every business should be aware of. The legal implications document explains that if a personal data breach has occurred, you may need to notify the ICO, and you may also need to notify affected data subjects, but that not all cyber incidents are personal data breaches. So it talks you through the circumstances in which a notification is required, who should notify, what to notify, to whom you notify, and when and how, everything you should need to know. So going into that in a little bit more detail, it explains what a personal data breach is. And it's a very wide definition. A personal data breach is a breach of security leading to the accidental or unlawful destruction, loss, alteration, unauthorised disclosure of, or access to personal data. And personal data is data that with which you could identify somebody essentially. So we set out what the definition of personal data breach is in the document. The document also goes on to explain that the notification obligation is on data controllers rather than data processors or sub-processors, and how to work out if you're a controller or a processor. It explains the exceptions in which a personal data breach does not need to be notified to the ICO, which is essentially when it's unlikely to result in a risk to the rights and freedoms of natural persons. It explains the factors you should consider when deciding if a notification to the ICO is required. So those are factors such as the type of breach, the nature, sensitivity, and volume of the personal data that's been compromised, consequences for the individuals affected, special characteristics of the affected individuals also, and the characteristics of the data controller. It also points to the fact that if the compromised data is special category data, such as health data or data that refers to race, ethnicity, religious beliefs, and so on, that is presumed to be high-risk data. The note goes on to explain about the periods within which you need to notify to the ICO. So you have to report without undue delay, and in any event within 72 hours. It also covers what to do if there's an international aspect to your business and to the breach, and the ways in which notifications can be given to the ICO. So that really hopefully covers all the points you would need to be aware of if you're reporting have to report a matter to the ICO. The note also goes on and talks through when notification to data subjects is required, and that's essentially when the breach is likely to result in a high risk to the rights and freedoms of natural persons. That's a higher test than for having to notify the ICO. It explains that notification to data subject should be done without delay, and that you need to make sure that the notification is in clear and plain language, and it sets out the information that such a notification is expected and required to include. And finally, the document encourages you just to consider whether you will regulate the obligations to any other sector-specific regulators. That will obviously depend in the sector that you are working in, and if there are regulators for that sector. The second component that we look at are contractual obligations. A cyber incident is likely to trigger certain contractual obligations, but it may also impede your performance of other obligations. And failure to respond promptly and positively to either of those could increase the risk of your business facing claims for breach of contract. And so we look at the main types of contract and contractual obligations that you should be reviewing in advance to make sure that before any incident occurs, you understand what contractual rights, obligations and risks an incident might pose for your business, so you can reflect on those and plan for those. So the document explains that in relation to data controller, data processor contracts, the need for data processors to be alive to, for example, the contractual provisions which might shorten their obligation to notify the data controller of an incident to within just 24 hours, which is much shorter than the rather more vague statutory time limit of without further delay. It also, there's, in terms of the data controller processor relationship, that can also give rise to contribution claims if, for example, an incident has occurred within the processor's systems, but the claim is directed against the data controller as the person that's got ultimate responsibility and usually, unfortunately, has the deeper pockets. The document also looks at third-party supplier contracts and considers what you should be looking at there, whether an incident is likely to affect your ability to meet contractual obligations owed to third-party suppliers. Check if an incident gives rise to obligations on you, for example, to notify other parts of the supply chain, just to be aware of those in advance. In relation to customer contracts, the document explains the need to consider the effect of a cyber incident on your ability to fulfill customer orders and ultimately to maintain customer confidence. Consider how you will prioritise order fulfilment in order to mitigate customer claims, and how you'll communicate with customers in order to maintain their confidence and ultimately your reputation. The third component that we look at is litigation risk, and under this heading, the legal implications document explains the current litigation landscape. Essentially, in 2018, the GDPR arrived and gave consumers far more legal remedies against organisations holding their data than they'd had in the past. A lesser known fact is that in 2018, Scotland also introduced its first class actions procedure, making mass claims a real possibility in the event of mass harm events such as data breaches and cyber incidents. So as a result of these developments and also just the general increase in cybercrime, we have seen an increase in the number of legal claims that are being made against businesses of all sizes, whether those businesses have suffered the incident directly or indirectly. So I do want to stress, I'm not just here to put the fear of death into you, and it's important to stress that not all cyber breaches give rise to liability for damages, but some can, and some claims do result. So we set out in the document the best lines of defence to mitigate against litigation risk. And the first two lines of defence, I suppose, are essentially strategic measures aimed at prevention. The first is just implementing and maintaining appropriate security measures, which is a GDPR requirement in any event. And the second one is just understanding and preparing to respond promptly to the legal and contractual implications of a cyber incident. So essentially planning in advance. Those are your best lines of defence. But we do also in the document advise that early litigation advice is essential if you want to mitigate your exposure in the event of claims arising. So by way of conclusion, the document encourages you to prepare an incident response plan so that you have a route map to follow when the time comes, and keep the plan under review. If an incident occurs, consider afterwards what parts of the plan worked and what would you do differently next time, and revise the plan. It's important to make sure it reflects what's helpful to you as a business. And if any claims are made against your organisation, ultimately seek strategic legal advice at an early stage. If you do that, you can help identify those claims which can be relatively swiftly headed off or resolved. And you can also devise early anti-proliferation and defence strategies for those claims that are more complicated or persistent. So I hope you find the legal implications document useful. As I said earlier, I think the pack is a wonderful practical toolkit which is comprehensive without being complicated. And I would just encourage you to download it and give it a try. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Katrina. Yeah, that was a great insight there. And certainly there's lots of information within that legal implications document that those can look through. I really like your detailed of the way you've said it, how to do this, when to do it, by what time. And your point, I think, at the end there about also revising your plan if you've been dealing with something, and you've had to go through this situation, which, it's not an unlikely situation that a personal data breach might happen, because we've seen it in the news, a lot of the time, unfortunately. So it's just that case of, did that work? The steps that I took to help prepare myself, what can I change to make it a better process the next time, or prevent it from happening, and stuff like that as well. I think your points there were really clear. And we've had a question come in on the chat. I can see from Denise here that's asking that she works for a lot of organisations that have contact details, like the names, emails, addresses for those people within the organisations. So that will be people within voluntary organisations. And she was wondering if that was the kind of information that was considered personal data. So I don't know if, Katrina, you want to answer this, or if you would like me to take this one for you.
Well, you can. I'm happy for you to comment as well. Certainly, my own reaction to that is absolutely that would be considered personal data. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, perfect. So, and I was wanting to point Denise probably to the ICO website, because they'll certainly have further information about what is considered personal data and how to protect those within organisations. I know that they have toolkits within their site to do that, and I'm pretty positive the links will probably be within that legal implications document as well, pointing you there. So thank you very much for that question. So the next speaker that we've got on the call is Detective Sergeant Craig Potter. So he's going to explain from his perspective what the benefits are of good incident management. So welcome to the call, Craig. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. So a bit about myself. I'm Detective Sergeant Craig Potter. I work within Police Scotland's Cybercrime Investigations Department. We have a full national unit covering the whole of Scotland and responding to all high-level cyber incidents across Scotland. We work very closely with the NCA, the National Crime Agency, and the NCSC, the National Cyber Security Centre, in providing a UK-wide response to cyber threats affecting the UK. And I'd just like to thank Catriona for her input, and Kirsty for bringing it. And the first thing I would say is, if the first time you're thinking about any of this is when you have been a victim of a cyber incident, just how much you need to think about, how much you need to respond to, what you have to do. If you're thinking about all the legal implications for your business or getting back up recovered, the police might be one of your last thoughts, last ports of call. And quite often, big cyber incidents don't get reported to us. But just a couple of statistics for you. So last year, 88% of UK companies who form part of a survey admitted to being the victims of a data breach at some point. So it's not just big companies getting hit. It's not just the companies in certain sectors getting hit. It is everyone. And I think that the total cost to UK companies was estimated at about £4 billion out of data breaches last year. So no one's safe. We're not safe as an organisation. You see cases of the NSA, FBI getting hacked. No company or no institution is 100% safe from a cyber attack. Everyone can get hit, and everyone does. When we're thinking about it, we tend to think about what is the motivation behind it, and that's possibly a good way for you to think about your incident response plans. Looking through sort of the points that Kirsty brought up, identifying your most valuable assets. I would suggest that in the majority of companies now, data is your most valuable asset, whether that be your customer list, whether it's the personal data, whether it's your financial data. If you're a sole trader builder, the way you're going to get targeted by a cyber attack is someone dipping into your emails, getting involved in your invoices, changing the details on the invoices, and getting them to pay the money elsewhere, and commercially sensitive data as well. So when you're thinking about identifying your most valuable assets, data is 100% key, and it's certainly what we're seeing. Ransomware groups initially just encrypted all your data and asked for a ransom to decrypt it. They're now migrating onto a secondary level where they actually steal your sensitive data as well. And if you don't want to pay for it to be decrypted, you might pay so that they don't release it on the internet or dark web. And that's we've seen that kind of migration along. They're up in the game a bit. They now don't just encrypt your data, they also steal your data and use that as a secondary ransom technique. And 2 years ago, we weren't seeing that at all. And now we're seeing that on almost every occasion. I and my team, we respond to lots of different incidents. We respond to big multinational corporations. We respond to sole trader businesses, and quite often we get involved in giving advice to just individual victims of cybercrime and hacking. And so what I would say is the companies that recover best or recover quickest are the ones who have a good incident response plan, have a good backup policy, have a good recovery policy, and have tested all these features out. And an incident response plan like this, it sets it out for you what you need to think of if you're setting up a cyber incident response plan. Some of the pitfalls that we've come across: companies set up a backup policy and leave it to one person to take care of. That person's responsible for backing up. Then they get hit by a cyber incident a couple of years later, and it comes to it that the backups haven't been occurring as regularly as the policy says they should have, or they've not been getting backed up off the network. So someone's just been backing them up on the network, and oh, wait a minute, they're encrypted as well. So we've not actually got a backup to recover from. And we've seen that quite a number of times, companies thinking they have a good backup policy, where in practice it's not working like it should. We've also seen cloud backup policies. People think, oh, I'm backing up to the cloud, it must be safe. But the policy they have in place is today's backup overwrites yesterday's backup automatically. And they actually, by the time they get to the cloud backup, it's actually overwritten and it's got all the encrypted data backed up, those kind of things. So understanding what your IT service contracts are, really, really important. Understanding what you are covered for. People think they get an IT package and they think that covers everything. Quite often it'll just cover your hardware on site. You might have to have a different policy for your software. You might have to have a different policy for your website. And people just assume without going through and fully understanding where the gaps are and what they need to fill. And something like this incident response plan will help you step by step go through and understand that. So we have seen that as well. We're getting pulled into reports of cybercrime, and the company's ending up in a time of crisis, and they're having big arguments with the companies who are supposed to be supporting them, and the companies who are supposed to be supporting them are saying, no, you didn't have that cover, and they end up having to shell out a lot of money in order to get an incident response team involved when it potentially should have been covered by their insurance. But because they didn't dot the I's and cross the T's on their insurance policy, it's not really covered. I would ask, we've seen it with some huge companies, including SEPA that was mentioned. How would you cope if you had to go back to pen and paper? If you couldn't use email, if you couldn't use any of your systems, and we've seen it with some other big companies, we've seen it with small companies, how would your business be able to function, or would it be able to function if you had to go back to using pen and paper as a short-term measure until you get back up again? And it does happen. It does happen, and it happens a bit more regularly than we'd like to think. And companies end up shelling out loads to get temporary networks put in place just so they can get up and running. How will you communicate if you've not got email, or if your phone system's corrupted? We deal with victims from some very large companies, and they end up communicating from personal devices with quite sensitive information because that is the only way that they can function. These are sort of things that it's useful to think about beforehand. And the emergency contact sheet, we use them in the police. We've got business recovery plans, and if everything goes offline, who are your key contacts? Who do you need to get in touch with? And having that key contact list, definitely very important. There's a bit of guidance in the incident response plan about incident response team, knowing who would have key roles in an incident. Kind of depends on the size of your business. If you're a sole trader, it's you and whoever you pull in. If you're a small business, you might be able to have a key team of 4 or 5 individuals, and right, one person, you are the police liaison. This person, you're the responsible for all the legal side. Next person, you're responsible for dealing with the incident response company, and we'll have another person who's responsible for managing the IT recovery. Those kind of roles. Thinking about who would take those roles. Are you going to have people on call to take those roles? Because quite often cyber attacks occur late on a Friday afternoon, and there's a specific reason for that, because they want the whole weekend to be in the network, and they only want people to discover it on Monday morning. So they've had more than 48 hours within your network before someone's coming to pick it up. Really quite key things to think about. The next thing I'll go on to the sort of communications piece. We can link in and could you joint communications with the police, and or SBRC can give advice on things like that, and there's some legal guidance on what you have to do with communications to customers. I would point out the downside of that. TalkTalk, one of the biggest comms companies in the UK, are still feeling the negative effects of their communications policy after they got hit a few years ago. They failed to report one small breach to their network and effectively tried to sweep it under the carpet, and then they got hit by a much bigger breach, and it took them, I think it took them 2 to 3 months before they informed customers. and customers were getting hit by secondary frauds, people phoning up pretending to be from TalkTalk because they had all this personal data and they hadn't informed anyone, they hadn't made anyone aware. And as a company, commercially, they're still feeling the effects of that. Experian's another one. Experian, exactly the same thing happened, and their policy in dealing with customers or dealing with non-customers, because they retain data on people who aren't specifically customers of theirs, and they tried to sweep it under the carpet a bit, and it hasn't gone down well for them. You're looking at quite substantial fines depending on how you respond to the incident in your sort of communications policy. I've kind of stepped out into the plan. So as the police, we want companies to report into us. We have this wealth of experience in getting involved in all of this. Most of what I've spoken to you isn't a police responsibility. We're there to investigate the crime, see if we can get to who's behind it. But having an incident response plan like this allows you to respond better to any cybercrime incident. And if you're reporting to the police, we'll be asking you a lot of these questions. What's your commercially sensitive data? Has there been any data exfiltration? We'll try and get an understanding, and because we deal with so many companies, we get dragged down understanding all this kind of side of it. What is your backup policy? What's your business recovery? Because there's a whole piece there around, we don't want companies going under. We've got a responsibility to the community, and we'll provide you with whatever support we can. We've got our preventions team who help with key messaging to help you with that kind of messaging piece to your customers, and they helped out with Scottish Business Resilience Centre one, and those kind of things. So if you report into the police, what happens? Generally, you'll phone the 101 non-emergency number. If it's depending, it basically gets graded on the level of incident. If it's a significant attack like a ransomware, it will usually come to us. But bear in mind that we're a small team. We only operate Monday to Friday. So if it's after 4 p.m. on a Friday, when a lot of cyber incidents get discovered, we do have a call-out facility, but it might not be as urgent as you need it to be. We would come in, we would try and get an understanding, and we would try and get key data that we can work on, and then we would step back and we'd take a back seat, because we understand that recovery for any company is the number one priority. You need to get back up on your feet, and we tend to leave it to the company to dictate how involved they need us to be within that initial cyber incident response. We will come into you for key data, particularly if it's a ransomware attack, because you're probably not the only victim, and we do want that data because we want to tie it up with other victims, and there's a whole national coordination piece. Is this attack coming from a state actor? Is it coming from an organised crime group? Or is it just some low-level sole actors? So we want access to that data, and that is how we catch people. We want access to the IP addresses they've come in from, the IP addresses they've exfiltrated data to, the spoof emails that you've received. Those are the kind of things that we want access to. And even some of the, if a server's been hit, depending on the level, we might want access to that server to do digital forensics on it. That's the kind of things we're coming in with, but we try to keep our initial demands on any reporter to an absolute minimum, and we try and provide as much of that peripheral guidance as we can, because we deal with so many companies. We know what the legal requirements are for you, reporting GDPR breaches and those kind of things. And And I've kind of waffled on for a bit there, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I am kind of open to questions. I think Kirsty's going to ask me a question, but if anyone else has got any questions on how the police can help, but hopefully I've touched on a few things around the cyber incident response plan, and I'll just reiterate my initial point. The companies that recover quickest are the companies that have incident response plans, incident response teams, and good backup and recovery policies. And generally, we'll see companies back up and running within a day or two to full capacity, whereas the likes of SEPA and some other companies, 6, 12, 18 months until they get a full recovery from a major cyber attack. And depending on the size of your business, can you cope with that? Could you cope with 18 months till a full recovery? It just doesn't bear thinking about. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig. That was really interesting. It was always great to hear it from your perspective as well, dealing it from a different side of angle, because we always look at the prevention side from SBRC here as well. And you were mentioning some like key things of making sure like that plan's in place. You were talking about, your backup system and things like that. And all of this information is to help prepare you is within this introduction document as well. It talks about making sure that your backups are working and you have them different places so that you can recover. And I think that was a point of Katrina as well, was like making sure that you test all these plans out and make sure that it does work for you in your business. And you've certainly covered some great points there about, making sure that you report incidents to the police, because that's something we always try to encourage people to do, is to come forward and report those incidents, no matter kind of what it is. And I think from what you were saying, that helps you identify trends that are within different charities and businesses, so that you can put your efforts into matching up those cases and building a better picture as well. Do you feel that businesses are taking it more seriously, cybercrime?
Some businesses are, not all businesses are. So I was recently at a seminar across UK law enforcement, and the estimated figures of reporting ransomwares into the police are around 10%. So if you think we're only capturing about 10% of the data and 10% of the attacks on police, for us, the way we catch people is we link a number of these together. We identify where the criminal actors are operating from, and it's usually a big international law enforcement operation. So if we're missing out on 90% of that data, it seriously impacts our ability to identify and target the groups responsible. And we understand the reasons why. We get involved in the reasons why. The time and effort of reporting, we're just someone else. And at the moment, there is no legal obligation to report into the police. The Information Commissioner can instruct you to. They can make an obligation if you report to them, but there is no legal obligation to report to the police. Some other countries are going down that route. I think Canada enforce it, and Australia are currently looking at that through Parliament. Companies sometimes pay ransoms, and they don't want it getting out that they've paid ransoms. They would rather keep that quiet. They don't want to inform police. Some companies think it might be illegal to pay a ransom. It's not at the moment. We would advise strongly against it. But if it's something companies are going to do, then we can support them through that. And the legal risks, litigation. We see legal companies and insurance companies. We'll see a victim of a cyber attack reporting to us, and as soon as their legal company and insurance company get involved, they'll take a step back. They won't share information with us because of that litigation risk against them. And in spite of us telling them that we're not going to share their data with anyone, we're not going to put it in the public domain, from their own self-preservation point of view, they see it as, no, we need to step back, we need to stop sharing data, which is very frustrating from us, and almost from an ethical and moral point of view, you're not the only company getting hit. And if we want to protect the UK as a whole, we want to help protect you. You would want us to help protect you. So only by informing us can we help protect others. So it's kind of, it can get frustrating at times, but I think it is picking up, and the more awareness events, the more it's in the media, that police do respond to these incidents. Some people don't even think police investigate cyber incidents. It's just, it doesn't bear thinking about, but there it is. Hopefully it does improve even more, but I think it has picked up in the last few years.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that, Craig. We have had some questions coming through. I'm not sure if I'll be able to answer all of them on this session today. Somebody is asking, do we recommend having an incident response form for users to report a breach within their organisation? I'm assuming that would be James. I think that's a good stepping point. It depends how many people, again, within your organisation are having to report to and where, but yeah, having those sort of easy methods for people to report incidents to quickly, the quicker you can do it, the quicker it can kind of be looked at and resolved. So if that a form in your organisation might be a good solution, or maybe it's a key contact that everybody goes to, but I think having those sort of roles within organisations of who it is, who you go to, and making that clear to all staff, because I think a key point probably for me is an incident response isn't just left to the IT person or that one person within an organisation. Everybody has a responsibility within an organisation to be aware of the plans and how to respond to it. I'll do one more before I jump back to my slides here. And the top one, it says, how does an incident response plan scale with severity of an incident? So this pack seems very much geared up towards major disasters, so it's hard to visualize how it might be used in scenarios that are not quite as drastic. Was it Katrina, did you say you wanted to answer that one live?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. Just to say, I appreciate that having a response plan in place may be even more critical if it's a major incident you come across, but I don't think, in fact, do not confuse that with if it's only small incidents, you don't need to have one. You've got to remember that it takes a while to work out what the scale of your problem is. You might just discover that actually your emails seem not to be working quite right, but it'll take you a bit of time to work out if that is just a small part of a much bigger problem, or if it's just contained to that small thing. And it may not be as just emails, it may be something different. And if you come in on Monday morning to work and you've got a full diary of appointments or whatever, business meetings or whatever to go to, you don't want to be having to trying to work out how big the problem is and therefore what to do at the same time as trying to run your business. We've all got other things that we ought to be doing rather than managing cyber incidents. So having a response plan in place for whatever size of business and for whatever size of incident may or may not come your way, I think is absolutely critical. It may be that if it's just a minor incident, there's maybe parts of the response plan that you say, oh, well, this doesn't, this part of the response plan I don't need to worry about on this occasion because that part of my system hasn't been compromised, but there will be other parts of the response plan that absolutely do help you, give you a route map to follow to let you quickly know what you have to do, or work out who you maybe be able to delegate things to, or what third-party suppliers or contractors you've got who can take a look at certain issues for you, and let you get on with the day-to-day, which ultimately is what you need to do to keep your business continuity going and make sure that your customers aren't impacted. So I think that's an easy, don't fall into the trap of thinking that if you're a small business or you've only got small risks that you shouldn't have a response plan. I think everyone should have one.
That's a great answer, Katrina. Probably couldn't answer it better myself. And I think you're right. It's kind of weaving. It's not setting cyber incidents in silo and a different part of your organisation. This should be part of your wider business continuity planning. just like you would for fire emergencies, power cuts, water shortage, whatever the case may be. Cyber incidents are basically another business risk that needs to be managed in that sort of sense. And I know one of the questions was like, trying to figure out what they should be concentrating most on, and that all depends on the business and how what they see as their most key priorities. It could be the company's website that they're dealing with, they're taking customer orders from. That might be their thing that they need to look at, or it's maybe some sort of equipment or something that they use. So everybody's response plan is going to be slightly different, and that's where this pack has got some great advice and guides for you to kind of think about those questions and what that reflects in your own organisation. I'm going to share back my screen here a second, because I'd like to ask you another poll before we go, which is this one here. So this, now that you've sort of seen the pack and what's sort of included and heard from some of our speakers today, I want to find out if you feel more confident about setting up your cyber incident response plan, having done this session so far. Let me relaunch the poll here. There we go. Thank you, Katrina and Craig, for your insight. That was really useful. I'm going to get people to answer this poll here first of all. I've popped the link in the chat as well of where you can download the pack from the Cyber Scotland website, and I'll show you in 1 second where you can get that online. So we've had good response here so far. We've got 96% saying that they feel a lot more confident now, having been through this session. So that's great to hear. For those that are still looking for a little bit more confidence, I'm going to show you some extra links that you can go to help with that. So let me do this. So there is more information available on incident response on cyberscotland.com. So that's our website. And to download the pack, you want to click on the Developing an Incident Response Plan, and that will take you to the page where you can get a link of all of the documents individually, or if you want to download the pack as a one file and a zip file onto your computer, that's available as well. So the link is also in the chat if you want to download it. You can send any further sort of questions through to SBRC on their website through the inquiries form. But that just leaves me to say thank you so much to Katrina and Craig for their insight and being part of this session today. I hope you all find it beneficial. And thank you to Claire for setting up the call. And finally, thank you to you for joining this session. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.